Welcome to this module about the Office Developer Patterns and Practices PowerShell commandlets. The Office Developer Patterns and Practices PowerShell commandlets are part of the Office 365 PnP initiative. And besides the commandlets, we actually provide a lot of other information and a lot of other code samples. For instance, we provide guidance documentation on how to do certain tasks in Office 365. We provide monthly community calls where you can join in and discuss things. We have office hours where you can go in a bit more detail with us. When I say us, I'm talking about the core team, which is the group of people that sort of coordinate the whole Office 365 developer patterns and practices initiative. We provide information about certain themes like how to brand things, how to do remote provisioning, etc. And one of the offerings that we have is the patterns and practices PowerShell commandlet. So this is the agenda. So I will go into why is there another commandlet module. Then I'll show you a brief overview of all the commandlets there. Then we go into how to install them, and then I will end with a demo. So if you've been using PowerShell towards Office 365, you might be aware of the fact that there are already commandlets out there, and they are provided by Microsoft. And you can question, so why is PnP having their own commandlets? Well, they're sort of complementary. So the Office 365 commandlets that you can download from Microsoft are mainly focused on administrative tasks to create sites, remove sites, adding users, creating groups, etc. So they create the containers in which you want to work in. Then with the PnP commandlets, they focus more on the artifacts inside of those containers. So lists, views, fields, you can upload files, you can remove files, you can create list items, remove list items, etc., etc. So they work sort of hand in hand. So it is not needed that you install the Office 365 commandlets because there are some commandlets in the PnP commandlet library that are sort of duplicating what the Office 365 commandlets do. For instance, creating site collections or removing site collections. So in order to convince you why it is good to use the PnP commandlets, I want to show you two code snippets. I want to show you first the what I call the old school way of doing it in PowerShell, and then I'll show you the new school way of doing it. So if you look at this snippet here, basically what you see here is that I am loading two assemblies. I'm running the client DLL and the client runtime DLL. And then I specify the URL of the site I want to connect to, and then I ask for credentials, username and password, and then I have to create in a somewhat difficult to read way, but I have to convert those credentials to something called an Office 365 or SharePoint Online credential. And that has to do with the way SharePoint Online authenticates you. So then I create a client context, and when I'm done creating the client context, I set the credentials property of the client context to my credential object that I just created. And then I can start to write my script. So basically, for every PowerShell script that you write, you're sort of duplicating these lines on top of your PowerShell script. And you might put them in a method or in a function or in another commandlet, but you're still duplicating this every time to build up a context and to do things. Another thing you're doing here effectively is you're writing C# code in PowerShell, because this is exactly the same approach you do if you would write code in C#. You basically create a client context, you create a credential object, you set the credential object to your client context, and then you start to do the things that you want to do. Now, in a more I would say PowerShell approach, a more PowerShell-alike approach, is what the PowerShell commandlets from the PnP initiative offer you. And these three lines of code do exactly the same as that script that I showed you on the previous slide. So basically, I create a URL and put it into a variable, and then I say connect SP online with that specific URL. And then I can, if I want to, I can retrieve the context. So again, this is the C# thinking again with get SPO context. The context is returned then from the PowerShell commandlet, from the PowerShell library. So this context you don't really need, but we'll show you that. I'll show you that in the demo a bit later on. So if you compare the two snippets, this is much less code you write, but effectively behind the scenes, it does the same. So it creates a context, it creates a credential object, etc. Now, there's a couple of things that the PowerShell commandlets, or specifically the connect SP Online commandlet, does that is a bit more difficult to pull off in old school PowerShell, is that you see here that I don't ask for credentials. So what the PowerShell commandlet will do is it will connect to the Windows Credential Manager that you can find in the control panel or in the settings of Windows. And in the Credential Manager, it will look for an entry that has this specific URL in there. And if it can find a matching entry matching this URL, it will read out the username and password from that credential and then use that one to authenticate. That way, you don't have to prompt for a username and a password, and you also don't have to hard code a username or a password in your script, which is absolutely a no-go. So this way, you can build scripts that you can move around environments. As long as the Windows Credential Manager entry is there, your script will work. Let's have a look at all the available commandlets, and that's quite a list. And I will not go into every specific commandlet here, but it's still quite a list. So a brief overview of what you can do here. You can create content types, you can create fields, you can create lists, list items, views. You can add a web part to a web part page. Notice that because it's Office 365, it's not possible to upload a web part assembly, but you can still refer to an existing web part that's already available on the server, and then by uploading its XML. You can create wiki pages. You can enable and disable features. You can export and import part of the taxonomy. You can set auditing. You can register or unregister custom actions. You can set property bag values. You can create groups. You can create subwebs. You can set the theme or the composed look of a site. You can create subwebs. You can create there's like an enormous list. You can set up the navigation, the quick launch and the top navigation of the site, etc., etc., etc. And I will come by a few of these commandlets when I do the demo. Now, how do you install these commandlets? It depends a bit on which operating system you're using and which version of PowerShell you have available. Because this one is the easiest. So if you run Windows 10, for instance, it's the easiest way to install the commandlets is by using one of these commands that you see right now on screen. So the easiest way to say install module and then office-dev PnP .PowerShell and then a version number .commands. That version number points to where you want to use the commandlets. So there's a v16 version that is used for SharePoint Online. And there's a v15 version, which is for SharePoint 2013 on premises. So v15 is for SharePoint on premises, SharePoint 2013, and SharePoint 2016 on premises, and v16 is for SharePoint Online. The reason we have different versions has to do with the fact that behind the scenes of the powers of these commandlets, we use the client-side object model, the CSOM SDK, and they come in different versions for the different installation. So for SharePoint Online, there's a different version of the CSOM SDK as there is for the on-prem version. In the future, there will most likely be a third version of the commandlets because in the PnP initiative, we will also release a specific version for SharePoint 2016 on-premise, which has a richer API than SharePoint 2013. So there will be a version for SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2016, and a version for SharePoint Online. So this is the easiest way to install it. Another way to install it, basically, let me explain that. What happens is if you install module, if you execute that commandlet, it will connect to the PowerShell Gallery, which is a website, PowerShellGallery.com. And there it will find the latest version of the commandlets, downloads them, installs them, and configures them on your machine. Another way to install them, if you run on older versions of PowerShell, say version 3 or up, you can download the binary installer, and the URL is shown in the green section here. So navigate to that site, and there you will find always the latest version of the commandlets available for download. It's an MSI file that you can use to install the commandlets on your machine. you will not automatically be notified if there's a new version. You will have to make sure that you download the newer version if you want to upgrade. We will release a new version every time the PnP Core library is being updated, and that means every month there will be a new version of the commandlets available for you to download. Sometimes we release a version of Core more often. Sometimes we find a very blocking issue, for instance, that we need to fix, and then we do an intermediate release. The PowerShell commandlets follow those intermediate releases, and the main reason for that is that behind the scenes of the PowerShell commandlets, we use the PnP Core library. So the PowerShell, think of the PowerShell commandlets as a very thin layer on top of the PnP Core library, and that's the reason we are in sync there. Now, enough slides. Let's go into demo and show you how things work. So I have a PowerShell session open here, and maybe I should increase the font size a bit so you can actually see what I'm typing. Let's go a bit bigger. There we go. So the first thing you do with the PowerShell command is that you connect to your server. So connect SP Online, the URL, sites team. If I just press enter right now, it will connect to my site collection, and you see it didn't ask me for any credentials. Now, if I want to force to be asked for credentials, I can do it like that. Credentials, get credential, press enter, it will prompt up credentials. If it cannot find any credentials in the credential manager for that specific site, what it will do, it will automatically prompt you. Right now I'm forcing it to prompt me, but if it cannot find any credentials in the Windows Credential Manager, it will prompt me to specify those credentials. So connect again. So now I have a connection to my site, and for instance, I can test if my connection is valid by saying, hey, I want to show all the lists I have in this site collection. Get SPO list, press enter, and it connects to the site, and you see that it returns the title, the ID, and the URL of the list. You can use the standard pipe tricks that you have with PowerShell. So I have a new PowerShell session here, and what I want to do right now is the first thing you want to do is to connect to the site collection. So I'm going to enter connect SP Online, and then the URL SharePoint sites team. If I press enter right now, you will notice that it's actually not prompting me for credentials. And that means that in my Windows Credential Manager, I have an entry in there that specifies, okay, if you go to this site collection, then use these credentials. And the PowerShell commandlet, the connect SP Online commandlet, will check in the Credential Manager if there's an entry and then use those credentials. You can use sort of wildcard tricks in the Credential Manager. So basically what I did there is I created an entry that points just to this URL. The commandlet will then figure out automatically that it can actually use that credential. If there is one available that points to this URL, then it will use that one first. And if there's one available that points all the way to team, then it will only use that one. So you can actually use different, you can do some leveling there if you want to call it like that. So I have my connection valid right now, and because no error popped up, I'm validly connected. So now I can say, for instance, give me all the lists in the site collection. So get SPO list, press enter, and you will see the lists there. Now, if I want to retrieve a specific list, there's several ways of doing that. It's the same commandlet, and it has an identity parameter. And in here, for instance, I can specify the grid for this document library. So if I take this grid here and paste that in there, press enter, you will see that it returns that specific list. But of course, grids are not very user-friendly. It's actually enough to just enter the title of the list, and it will return that same list for you. Now, this list I can put into a variable, standard PowerShell, and if I enter, if I have a look into what kind of methods and properties I have in this object, here you see that if you're familiar with development at least, you will see that all the CSOM properties are exposed to PowerShell. You can retrieve properties here or set values and then update the list. Now, I have my list right now, so I can actually say, okay, given that list object that I have here, I want to see all the views in that list. If I press enter, right now it returns all the views. You see that the all documents view, it's a bit truncated here, but the all documents view is the default view here. And then there is a relink documents, which is not a default, and an asset libtemp and a merge documents. And these are all built-in views that I get out of the box with that list. So I can retrieve, for instance, the all documents view. So if I say view is get SPO view, and right now I sent in this parameter list, I can just actually write documents here if I want to. That's the same effect. Then the identity of the view, all documents, and it returns me that specific view. Now, if I look in the view, get member, there's again all the properties. There's a view fields property in there. So if I want to retrieve that one, view fields, I see the different fields that are making up this this view. The doc icon, link file name, modified, the editor. Those are by default shown in that view. Now, what happens if you retrieve, for instance, a property like, let's see, if I retrieve view query. That one is loaded. See if I find something that will actually show me an error. There should be a view here. Let me see, image URL maybe. Let's see what this one returns. Nope, that one works too. Let's go to the list object and show you it there, because I want to show you basically this is a behavior that is not specific to PowerShell, but it's actually a behavior that is specific to client-side object model. So if I go to the list and I go see if I have fields here, there we have an error message. An error occurred while enumerating through a collection. So it's not that the commandlet is wrong right now, but basically what it means is that the client-side object model did not tell the server at the time it retrieved that list, like, hey, server, I also want the fields to be populated. I want the list of fields there. Now, this is, I'm going now into a bit of C or C# type of coding, but I'll show you how to load the fields collection. So for that, I need a context. So I'm going to retrieve the context. Right now I have a context, and if I press CTX, you will see that there's all kinds of properties set here, which version of the server we're using, etc. So given this context, I can actually do a couple of things. I can say, okay, context load, and I want to load the fields collection of that list. And then I have to say execute query. Now this is a way of telling the server, it's like, hey server, I have this list object, there are fields in there, I want to retrieve them. So I want you to return the fill up effectively the fields collection of the list, so I can actually have a look at them. And this is just the first line here, the load is just the request itself. The second line is, okay, and now execute this request at the server, so the server comes back with something. So this is a way of doing it, CTX execute query. If you want to do it more in PowerShell style, you can actually write execute SPO query. It's the same effect. So if I press enter fields, there is my fields right now. So all the fields that are part of this list are being returned. And I can add fields to this, I can remove fields in like CSM style, which is a bit cumbersome, and it's a bit it's just difficult to read. So we have actually command lists for this. But what I will do now first is I will create a new list. New SPO list, title demo, template, generic list. So if you use the user interface to create this list, it would be called a custom list, but from the backend code, it's called a generic list. Then a URL, lists demo, because I want to use this specific URL. And then there's another couple properties you can set. For instance, I want this list to be shown on the quick launch. If I press enter right now, it will create this list. And in the meantime, I have the site here, and you will see that the list is not there. It's not on the quick launch. And we have, if I go back to PowerShell, the commandlet is done running. So if I reload this site right now, you'll see that my demo list is there. And there's a title field in there. As by default, you always get a title field. Now, in order to add a field to this list, I can say add SPO field. To which list? I can omit the list parameter, and then I'm creating a side column. So this one single commandlet creates side columns and creates list columns. So right now I'm going to add this to the list demo. Then I say, what is this field called? It's called location. I can give it an internal name, which is location. What type? I'm giving it a text. And then I can, if I want to, specify an ID. If I want to add it to the default view, and I do, and press enter. It's adding that field. There we go. It returns the field also for me for reference. And if I reload this page right now, you see there's my location field there added to the default view. Now, if I want to create a new view in this list, it's a matter of saying add SPO view. Which list? Demo. What is the title of the view? Locations. And then the query I can specify and the fields. And in this case, I only want this location field. You have to specify the internal name here. If I want to add multiple fields to my view, I can say like that. So comma and then separated, so comma separated list of fields. So press enter. There is my view. If I reload the page right now, there's my locations view, and you see that the only location field has been added. So this way it's relatively simple to actually create artifacts and easy to script artifacts by just using a few commandlets instead of writing lots of lines of C# code. Just basically creating a list, adding a field, and adding a view is 3 lines of code in order to pull this off. Now we have if you want to have a look at all the commandlets, you can say get command name and then module office dev PnP PowerShell v16 commands. Press enter and you get a list of all the commandlets there available. Now if you want to see, for instance, an example on how that new list commandlet works, so you say help new SPO list. And then if you specify detailed, you get a list of you get an overview of this specific commandlet. So which kind of parameters do we support here? And description of all the parameters. And then we have a bunch of examples. And sometimes there's only 1 example, sometimes 2, sometimes 4, and it goes up to 5, I think, for some commandlets. How to use that specific commandlet. So this help is all baked into the commandlet library. You get it there for free. Now another commandlet that, and I would say almost it's our most popular commandlet, is the commandlet to extract and apply a provisioning template. So given that I connect to this site right now, I can say get SPO provisioning template, and I can specify an output, say PnP demo XML. And if I press enter right now, it will connect to the site and okay, the file already exists, so I'm saying, okay, sure, I want to overwrite. And it connects to the site, and you see this progress bar there in the top, and it will retrieve information about all the artifacts it can actually discover. It discovered in this site, and the end result is an XML file, which is the template of this site. So then you can connect with Connect SP Online to another site. You apply this template. So there's another commandlet called apply SPO provisioning template, and then it takes as an input this XML file, and you apply that template to another site, and the result is that you get basically the artifacts moved over from one site to the other. So you can do full round trips like that. Another useful commandlet, for instance, is the ability to add or embed JavaScript in a site. So if you want to have a piece of JavaScript, a JavaScript file that is available throughout your site collection, the easiest way to do it is actually with the add SPO JavaScript link. Add SPO JavaScript link, sorry, block link. You give it a name, say jQuery, URL. Now I don't have the jQuery CDN, but it's something in the shape of CDN jQuery org, and then whatever the file is called jQuery.js. Well, this is an incorrect URL, but you get the idea. And if I press enter right now, it will just add that JavaScript link to the current web I'm connected to. But if I change the scope to site, it will do it at site collection level. And the result is that this JavaScript file, this JavaScript file will be included or embedded in every page throughout your site collection. So this is a very easy way of adding a piece of JavaScript to every page, basically. But this is a way, for instance, how you can introduce branding throughout your site without actually modifying the master page, simply by adding a JavaScript link. What happens behind the scenes, and this may be interesting if you're a developer, it is introducing a custom action and setting the custom action script link to the URL that you just specified here. So that's happening behind the scenes. Another thing you can do, you can change the homepage. If I said get SPO homepage, it will return to me what the current homepage is. You can set SPO homepage, can specify the root folder's relative URL. So for instance, site pages, my home ASPX, and now it will change the homepage to my homepage. So you can easily change the homepage. Now, where is that? If you don't have that file, you can say add SPO file. Path, this is the local path of the local on your local machine. So C temp my home ASPX, and then which folder you want to upload it into. Well, I want to upload it into the site pages folder, and the result is that it will upload this file to the site pages folder, and then you can use the set SPO home commandlet to set the actual home page. Now, what I didn't demo is how to install it. And it's actually very simple. I mentioned it already in that specific slide. But if you say install install module, Office Dev PnP PowerShell v16 commands, and press enter, we'll connect to the PowerShell gallery, and it will download the commandlets and install them on your machine. So the PowerShell gallery by default is an untrusted repository. There is a way to make this a trusted repository, but by default on Windows 10, it's an untrusted repository, and I leave it like that for testing reasons. So do you trust this? Are you sure? Yes. You download it, and basically it notes that it was already there, so it's not installing it but right now, but normally it will download it. Another way of testing if this works is if I, for instance, create a folder here, go to that folder, I can say save module, Office Dev PnP PowerShell v16 commands, and there was a path there, see demo download. So what it will do now, it will download the whole package and saves it, but it will not install it. So it will just make it available for you to consume at a later moment in time if you want to. So if I look in this folder right now, you see there's a folder, Office Dev PnP commands, the version number, and there's all the files that make up the commandlet library. So this is an easy way to check out what make up the commandlets, and you can use them for later reference, for instance, or if you want to see which DLLs are made part of this module, or whatever you want to do with it. So if you do not run Windows 10 or have the latest version of the Windows Management Framework installed, which allows you to do this install module, you can manually download the commandlet setup file from the GitHub site. So if I go to https://github.com, Office Dev PnP PowerShell, this is the main repository in GitHub where we have all the commandlets and the source code of the commandlets located. So if you want to see, for instance, what the new SPO list commandlet does behind the scenes, it's just a matter of finding that commandlet. And let me show you briefly where you can find them. So for instance, here's the commands folder. If you go to the commands folder, you'll find folders, basically categorized folders. So if I go to lists, you will find here the new list commandlet. So if I open that one, you'll see that there's actually not that much happening, especially if you know C#. There's a bit of attributes here that describe what the commandlet does. Then there's a bunch of parameters that you can specify in the commandlet. And this is where the work actually happens. So this is a call into the PnP Core library to create that list. So the PnP Core library here does all the work actually. The commandlet is just a very thin layer around that UI. Or around the core library. So if I go back to where to find the installers, So if you end up on the PnP PowerShell repository at the root level, there's this releases entry over here. And if I click on releases, you'll find the latest version always at the top, and you see that March 2016 is the latest. And here you can download the MSIs, the V15 or the V16 version. The V15 is for SharePoint 2013 on premises, and I have to say again, for SharePoint 2016 on premises right now. And if you want to run SharePoint Online Office 365, then you download the 16 version. Right. So there are way more advanced things you can do with the commandlets. You can build very complex scripts. You can switch context. You can cache context, etc., etc. So there's much more to tell, but we only have limited time, and I see that I already have been talking for around 30 minutes right now. So I'll leave it at this. If you find any issues, please do not hesitate to go to the GitHub repository and post an issue there. So if you go to the GitHub repository here, you'll find issues. Go there, post them, and we'll have a look at them and try to fix them for you. Right, this was it for now. Thank you very much.